Welcome back to another episode of Etc. Today, Jonah and I are joined by a very special guest, our psychology teacher, Mr. Wadlington.
Hello.
Yes, so for those of you who don't know, Wadlington is a psychology teacher here at Prairie Ridge. He's actually our teacher right now, thus why this is happening. And just to get right into it, really the overarching theme of the episode is all about you. So we just want to know as much about you and eventually maybe, talk and get into a broader, thing about psychology in the world. But really quick, just can you kind of talk to us about, your childhood and what that was like?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having me.
Thank you for.
I'm honored that you chose me to be a part of this. This is great. I have to admit, I'm a little nervous. Like it's a little. I've never done anything like this before, so it's my first time ever doing this. So I'm a little nervous. But anyways, all right. And I don't really like talking about myself, so this will be a challenge for me to do that. So, well, I grew up in Crystal Lake. I'm a Crystal Lake kid. I grew up in a subdivision called Coventry. It's right behind Country Donuts. That whole subdivision, that's my childhood. My history is I went to Coventry, I went to Lundall, and then I went to Crystal Lake South. And I don't, that's it. Like, I don't know, a pretty traditional childhood, nothing out of bounds, nothing crazy. I don't have any crazy stories except for, in 8th grade, my father died of a massive heart attack. And so I was 13. So that was definitely like a pivotal moment in my life. But, other than that, pretty traditional life, nothing too outside the box. I don't really have too many stories except for, I grew up in Crystal Lake. So all the people who are watching this, they grew up in Crystal Lake, your existence is pretty similar to mine.
Yeah.
It's not really that much different.
So what were some of your interests or just kind of things you did to fill the time when you were a kid?
Well, when I was a kid, I just loved being outside. I was outside constantly, and I still love being outside. But there would be days, even like today, where I would just go outside and be outside all day. I would just go and have fun, and the neighborhood was always very interconnected with other children and kids and friends, and we would go outside and just do everything. I don't know, we would make up everything we possibly could, whether it was cutting broomsticks off of the tools in the garage to play baseball with rocks or tennis balls or riding bikes or whatever else it might be. As I grew older, so like when I kind of became your age, a little bit younger maybe, it was outside, reading, learning. I loved to explore. I was always pretty curious and always had questions that if I came up with in my head, I wanted to answer. So pre-Google, pre-internet, I'd have to go to the library,
Oh my gosh.
Or whatever. I would ask, I'd go to my father when he was alive, or my mother, or my neighbors, or whoever, and be like, hey, tell, do you know anything about this, or whatever it might be. I had a neighbor, that actually reminds me of something. Actually, I had a neighbor across the street, Mr. Booth. He was a good man, and Mrs. Booth, wonderful people. And he worked for Morton Thiokol. And so Morton Thiokol is, well, you would know Morton because of the salt. But Morton Thiokol is a chemical company. They make tons of stuff. They make products, everything. Long story short, I think it was 1987. The Challenger space shuttle went up and exploded. And I remember watching it in school. We watched it in school live. We watched the space shuttle and then exploded while we were watching it in school. So I was probably in fifth grade. Well, long story short, Mr. Booth worked for Morton Thiokol, which was in Woodstock. Morton Thiokol made these rings that caused the leak in the fuel tank, and that's what caused the explosion. He was not involved in that at all, but I remember being so curious, like how, like why could that happen? And I randomly asked him, and he worked for Morton Thiokol. And he's like, well, it was the O-rings. They were called the O-rings. And I just remember, like, from that point on, asking questions and getting answers was my thing. Like, that was my thing. Like, I just wanted to know. I needed to know things. I don't know why. And I'm kind of like an obsessive retriever of needing to know things.
So, do you think that curiosity that you had throughout your childhood is part of what led you to pursue psychology? Because I know even to this day, there's a lot of things that are unanswered about psychology. So, did that lead you down that path?
Yeah, because it's like it's the final frontier.
Yeah.
Like
we
have a lot of answers to a lot of things. I don't know if that's good or bad, right? Science can try to answer stuff. We have a lot of things that we can answer with the human psyche. We can maybe explain some of it, but there's just so many variances of how you can explain human behavior.
Yeah. So many different perspectives, and everything kind of makes sense in its own way if you look at it from the biological perspective, or that versus nurture. So
sure,
everything kind of makes sense a little bit if you look at it from a different way. So
yeah, and it can go into multiple directions. So it's like you can kind of think you have an answer, but you don't know if you fully have it.
Yeah.
And like that intrigues me. And then sometimes in my head, I'll think, oh, well, I think that's the answer. And then I'll think, well, then I'll run across a friend or another thing or whatever it might be, and a new thought comes about to entertain, and I'll be like, wow, I didn't think about that, or whatever it might be. So I do like psychology for the idea of the things that it can explain, but I also like the ideas of what it makes the human mind think about in order to explain itself.
Would you say there was like a specific moment maybe in high school and where you knew like teaching psychology specifically is what you want to do, or is it kind of something you always had and something you always thought you'd want to do?
Well, so psychology, it's interesting because psychology, it was not taught when I was in high school. I took no psychology classes in high school because it wasn't taught.
Yeah.
Psychology was not taught here when I started teaching.
Okay.
So we started teaching psychology in 2007. I think it's been 15 years. And that was a big thing where like teachers, we all kind of got together and like we should be teaching psychology because we were teaching sociology, and I was teaching sociology at the time. And then we started having conversations as sociology teachers of like, well, why are we teaching psychology? And then that's how that kind of became about. And then teachers throughout the district who were teaching soc basically rolled into psych and said, okay, well, let's create the curriculum and go. To your question, I don't know when I really wanted to teach psychology. I don't know. I don't know that answer. And I don't know exactly when I really truly decided when I wanted to become a teacher. I think I left high school pretty much in the standard row of like, well, I guess I'll go into business, or something. I don't know. Like I'll just go into like business management or something. And then upon reflection, I guess freshman, sophomore year in college, it was like, well, I don't know if that's what I want to do. I don't know if that's what I want to do. I don't really want to do that. And then I really didn't know what I wanted to do, but I had educators all over my family. My dad was a teacher. My uncles are teachers, like my dad's brother was a teacher, like all of these major mentors in my life were teachers. And I was like, okay, well, that seems to make sense. They seem to be pretty happy. They seem to kind of like what they're doing. Summers seem okay. Like, it's like, and I remember as a child, my father being around, he was present in my life. He was at things and had the flexibility in some ways to be able to like match my schedule, right? Which was kind of intriguing. Then I fell in love with a woman who was going to be a teacher. And I was like, okay, well, that's kind of interesting because I'm thinking about it. Okay, well, she's thinking about being a teacher. Well, that'd be kind of fun because I like her. And then we would match schedules and then we would have time together. Then the idea of having children, and then the idea of like, okay, well, when my day is kind of done, so to speak, their day is done too. So like 4 o'clock or so, like we're home, or whatever, we're doing something. And then we can go on trips in the summer or whatever. So I think it just kind of rolled into lifestyle.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm not the kind of guy that thinks about things like that. Not a planner.
Yeah.
I'm just not. It's like, all right, let's do that. And if I would have ended up a welder or something else or working on a car, I would have been fine. I'd been fine. It'd been fine.
Yeah.
Whatever. Or a lawyer. Like, whatever. I'd been fine. So that's too much thought.
So, like, right now it's kind of the year where seniors have, college has really been on our minds for really the entire year, but especially now when decisions are starting to come out. Like, back then, or at least for you personally, like, did you feel, was there a lot of anxiety and kind of focus, like, directed towards, like, the college application process, or were you kind of just like whatever happens, kind of happens?
Yeah. And I don't know, to your question of was there anxiety? I don't know, maybe so. Like maybe a lot of my peers and classmates were stressed about it. I just never was.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I can't explain why. I don't know why. I guess I always felt like because of some of my experiences as a child, as I told you, my dad died or, like that kind of stuff. It's like, I always just thought like, no matter what, it's going to work out.
Yeah.
This is going to work out.
That's a good attitude.
It's like, it may not be like exactly how I planned it because I'm not a huge planner, like I said, but it's like, I never really created the idea of a plan because I never really wanted to be beholden to the plan.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I kind of wanted to have my options open.
Yeah.
And somehow I meandered and wandered into this classroom. Like here I am, like I'm 20 years later.
Pretty sweet gig too.
It is a pretty good gig.
Yeah, it's really fun.
Yeah, it's a great gig.
Yeah.
Go.
And like we've talked about, being in the Crystal Lake community, we're obviously all very blessed.
Mm-hmm.
And like, for me personally, the anxiety really just came from like the applications. Like I'm kind of lazy. I don't really want to do the essays. There's a deadline. That anxiety, not really as much anxiety with like whether or not you get in, like whatever happens. But there's like a lot of like when you talk to people, they're like really like, oh, I gotta get in here. Like, like especially for people here, for the most part, I don't want to generalize, but like most of your options like are extremely good. Like you only have like pretty good options. Like,
right.
So like, oh, like maybe I wanted to go to Madison, but like I'm going to Ohio State instead. Like those are both like you're like still in the top 1% of the world. Like,
right.
At that point, just kind of got to look at like glass half full like that. So.
And I would even pull it back even further. Your point is totally valid. In the idea of, I would pull it back even further. The stress and the anxiety that you had or have or experienced, whatever it is, or are experiencing in this process, it is a privilege to be able to go through the process, to be able to go to college.
That is true.
That is just a privilege within itself.
Yeah.
Right. So the idea is that, yes, that's stressful. I get it. It's stressful for you, the essays or whatever it is. But the idea of you having the opportunity to be able to go to college, and then when you look throughout, the school within all of your peers, what is it like? 95% of you are going to probably go to college, at least attempt or go or try, or maybe it's 85%. But even if you're going to go into a trade or the military or whatever, like the fact that life has been built to a point to where you can at least have those options is a privilege. That's a privilege.
Yeah.
So yes, be stressed about college, be stressed about your applications, but understand that that's a really cool stress to be able to have. I know it's an oxymoron, but it's a cool stress.
I've never thought about it like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
it's kind of cool.
There's kids even in Crystal Lake that aren't able to pursue that higher education like we have the opportunity.
But sorry, I didn't mean to stop you there or interrupt you. But the idea would be is that like, I think we lose sight of that because everybody's going to, not everybody, I keep saying that, but most are going to college. So that's your environment. So you're just like, well, everybody, this is happening. Like look around my AP psychology class. Well, it's 100%. Every kid is going to go attempt college. So we just normalize it.
Yeah.
And then we think, okay, well, every high school senior in America is experiencing the same stress with having to fill out these applications, when in reality, you might be the minority.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? You might be.
Yeah.
So, all right, that's what I have to say about that.
So pivoting more towards, now you're a teacher. I know it wasn't necessarily like a straight road to get there initially from college, but I think you're in the unique position to be like a high school educator, and I've always been fascinated by that position. Do you have like just any insight in like what it's like to, be like educating like high schoolers, or kind of just like, any fun perspectives on what that's like?
That question can go anywhere. I mean, it's interesting. I've been teaching now for 20 years. And what's interesting is that no year has ever been the same as the previous year. They're similar, but the idea is that, all right, every single semester, every single year, I basically learn 150 new people, personalities, home life, whatever, whatever's going on. extenuating circumstances or just a life story. There's a life story in every single human that walks into the room. And so that is the cool part of the job, right? And I don't know, I honestly am so naive, except for my friends who go out or who work outside of education. I'm naive to the idea of like they show up and their day is kind of similar. I don't know if that's true. Like I could be, correct me if I'm wrong. But the idea is like I come in here every day, and even though it's like, it may look like it's the same day every day, it's never the same day every day.
Yeah.
And so I think to that point, that's what makes the job, I guess, somewhat engaging, is the idea that every day is going to potentially be different. Some days are bad. I mean, I could have a couple students who are in a really bad position, you know, whatever's happening to them. And it could be like a bad day in regards to like they need help, but then that is also rewarding too. You know, and the idea, like if you have a student who's suffering, and in any way, if I can help another human being have a better existence down the road, and even if I didn't create it, or it's just like, here's the door to student services or a counselor, or like whatever it might be. Do you need me to talk to your parents, or do you need help? That facet is pretty cool.
Mhm.
So I don't have like a specific story for you.
Yeah.
It's just the idea of what I can tell you is that teaching is nothing like being a student.
Yeah.
So it's not like me teaching high school is an extension of high school for me.
Okay.
It's like a totally different,
Yeah.
This is totally different. This is not, I understand it's high school for you,
Mhm.
but this is not anything like me being, you know, a 20th year senior. It's nothing like that.
I feel like that's something that is unique about psychology as well compared to a lot of other classes. I feel, even as a student, coming into this class every day, I'd say it is different each day. Just like you said, no day is really the same in here, because this class just allows for so much discussion, and even more so year to year,
Mhm.
there's always new information
Mhm.
coming out about psychology, which I think is really cool. Like statistics is statistics, calculus is calculus, biology at this point is biology. So that while as a student you're learning new information, I don't know that I think psychology is a really cool class because it gives the opportunity to, like, you're learning along with us.
Yeah. When I learned from you,
Yeah.
you know, I learned from, that's the cool part about this whole thing is like, I learned from you all too. It's not just me teaching you.
Mhm.
And like you said, we have conversations in here. I have no idea where they're going to go sometimes. I mean, I can ask a question or throw a question out, but I don't know how you're going to answer it.
Yeah.
And the cool part about it is like, I'll teach first hour AP Psych, so we'll use this semester as the example. Then I'll teach fourth hour, then I'll teach eighth hour. All three of those periods are going to be completely different.
That's cool.
You know, it's not like I'm going to walk in and teach first hour, because I don't know where the minds in that room are going to take that content. I don't know where you're going to take it. I don't know where you're going to take it. So it's like, it's kind of a wormhole.
Yeah.
And it's like, sometimes you got to steer it back in and be like, okay, let's relate everything we just talked about to this.
Mhm.
But yeah, I will equate it to the idea of the human mind is a Ferrari, and learning about it is a Ferrari. Like, it's cool. Like, the more you can get to
Yeah.
know yourself, and the more you get to understand yourself and those around you, and the deeper you can move it into yourself, I don't know what the answer would be there. It's like the idea of like you kind of become a cool machine.
Yeah. I think the psychology class is my favorite class I've ever taken in high school. The format of it, in terms of really, it's just a class. It's just, you're having conversations. Obviously, there's curriculum, and we need to somewhat stick to that.
Yeah.
But
Which we struggle with
Yeah.
sometimes, but I struggle with that sometimes.
yes, part of that might be my fault. But like, no matter like how we get there, like, it's just an interesting path. And the cool thing about psychology is, like we've discussed, it's not I don't want to say it's not a hard science, but it's way more younger, like, compared to like biology and like, you know, other forms of science. So it's not as concrete, which means there's room for discovery, and there's still mysteries out there, which I really think, like, the unknown is the most interesting part of learning to me, because just the fact that there's stuff we don't know yet. I mean, I guess that means like there's something to work towards, which is exciting.
Yeah.
And then the cool thing about psych is you can relate it to yourself. Like, sometimes it's scary if, like, you know, you're going through things and you don't necessarily like understand like why your body's feeling a certain way, or like why you might be in the mood you are, or even like more like physiological in terms of like, you know, feelings you have in your body. Like learning about like psychology, like it helps to be able to like understand like maybe why your body's like feeling a certain way, or you know, you're having these like thoughts based on you know, things you've been doing. So it just kind of helps you, as weird as it sounds, like understand how your own body works, which I think is extremely important and comforting. So
Yeah. And then linking that up, you know, the body and the mind, and then being aware of, as you stated, just yourself. Like I'm aware of myself. Like who is the true self? Like who like you can ask all those, you know, big esoterical questions, and the idea of like, you know, who am I? What's my purpose? You can do that if you want. And the idea is like, ultimately at the end of the day, it just kind of comes back to you, you know, and the idea of like who you are and what you are and how you feel about yourself, and this idea of self-acceptance. And like the moment the idea is that if a human being can truly like accept the self, and that's a hard thing.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. I mean, I struggle with it probably every day as well. It's a journey. But the idea is that the sooner you can get to that idea of self-acceptance, the more you can relax and probably quiet your mind and get to yourself. Yeah, and that's why this class is cool. Because you can sit here and be like, okay, I can contemplate, you know, Temet Naske, knowing myself. That's cool. That's cool.
So I guess we kind of talked about like how you got here and how it, like you talked about how it can be rewarding to like meet new students every year, like have every class be different. Do you have any moments that stick out as maybe like a most rewarding moment or year or I don't know, class?
Yeah. I mean, to that question, not like I can't like point to a class and be like, oh, it was my 4th hour AP Psych class, second semester, 2022, grades class 7. No, like I don't know if I can do that, but I can like point to, you know, specific instances where, you know, and this is where it's hard to talk about myself in this way sometimes, but like if I get an email from a student that I had 7 years ago, you know, and those will pop up, you know, a few times, more than a few times, maybe a semester. And it's like, here's this kid who I've not kind of forgotten about, but kind of like, hey, I haven't thought about this kid for 5, 6, 7, 8 years. Now they're 25, they're 30, you know, or whatever, or I've ran across them on the street with their children. And like, so I guess what I'm trying to get at to your question is like, it's cool to even, and it's humbling. It's beyond humbling to think that there is a person or a human being out there who is 30 or even 35 at this point, and somehow, some way, they think that I did something I did something for them, or I helped them, or they send me an email and like say like, hey, you know, this is what you did, or this is what you. That is beyond like rewarding. That's really cool. Like to just think that there is some human being existing somewhere in this realm, and they're sitting there every now and then. They'll think about like, hey, that guy taught me this, and that's beyond crazy. That's beyond crazy to me, and it's humbling and it's cool, and it's. I hope I'm not being arrogant or egotistical by stating it, but it's just kind of like that makes being a teacher worth it. Right. And so I don't need those accolades. Like I don't, at least I don't think so. I don't need a human being to tell me that, but it's cool when it happens unsolicited.
It's got to be a really cool feeling, especially because it's unexpected.
Yeah.
And it's always a good feeling when like you're reminded that like people kind of like recognize and are appreciative of things you do, especially because, you know, a lot of times you're going through life, you're kind of just doing stuff. And then to be reminded like, hey, I remember you did this, I appreciate it. Like that's gotta be a good feeling.
Yeah. So I guess, so totally off topic or not, whatever, on topic. It's like, I guess if you feel that, this is just a thought I just had. If you feel that towards a human being, it's cool to tell them.
Yeah.
Like that's a cool thing. So if you're, and I know that can be awkward sometimes, and it's awkward for me sometimes to go to somebody and be like, hey, you know, like you're important to me. or whatever it might be. That's just kind of cool.
Yeah.
And if we talk about this whole idea of like, all right, well, we want to talk about consciousness. We're all kind of connected in some way or form, right? Somehow. And it's cool to like connect in that way because we have this machine that can think about it and then act upon it. And then like, we can do that. It's kind of cool. And if I can make Jonah feel a little bit better, then it gets Jonah closer to self-acceptance. It also allows me to get closer to self-acceptance. And then here we go. Like it's just kind of this cool, I don't know, cyclical cycle.
And I think it eliminates, like, I don't want to say like one of the worst things about being a human, but like, I've always thought it kind of sucks. Like you have to, I think I'm always constantly trying to guess like what other people are thinking about because like if you're having like, like a conversation with someone and you want to try to like connect more with them, especially for people our age, it's hard to like, very rarely do you have like beyond surface level conversations with people about like, your emotions and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, we all know everyone's thinking about these things, just no one ever says it. And like when no one ever talks about these things, it kind of makes you second guess, like, am I the only one who like wants to like talk about my feelings sometimes? Or like, so like when people actually say, you're like, okay, good. Someone else actually like has feelings and wants to talk about these things. So it like, you don't have, it's kind of tiring, like trying to guess, like, am I okay to talk about this with someone? Like,
that's all right. Yeah, that's hard. I get it. And it's not like you want to, show up at 7-Eleven with your Slurpee and start spilling your guts to the guy that's, like that's probably inappropriate.
Yes.
But you would hope at some point in your existence that somebody gets to truly know your true self.
Yes.
Right? I mean, yeah, it's a weird game. It's a weird game, right? It's the idea of like, I got to wear this mask. Mm-hmm. You wear the mask, whatever. We got to play this game. But it's interesting when you get to individuals where you don't have to play the game. You just be like, this is who I am.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's scary.
Yeah.
That's vulnerability. I mean, vulnerability is good, but you're right. Trust me, I still struggle with that too. Like, hey, should I say that? Should I say this? Like, no, let's not say that. Let's not say that. Let's not do that.
I also feel like I hope that it will get easier as we grow up, go through college, early adulthood. I feel like the human ego is probably at its peak in high school.
When you say ego, you mean like your, like, just explain to me what you're saying there with ego.
I guess I shouldn't have used that word
because ego could be direct. Yeah, like, are you saying like your ego, like you are very important, Jonah? Is that what you're saying?
Like, I feel like high school students worry the most about how other people view them.
Okay, so that form of ego, meaning like a narcissist view of ego.
And I feel like people are almost like you said, like just it's nice to have like that reassuring feeling of that you made a difference. And I think we talked about it with Coach Jay when we had him on, and like it's so easy to just be nice to people. And I feel like sometimes high school students' egos are too big to just be nice to people. And it's not like at PR, we have like Eyes Open and Diversity Club and things that I think bring people together on a lot of different ideas, and even psychology classes along those same lines. But like you said, like it can be, you have to put yourself in a vulnerable position sometimes, but just saying that you appreciate someone or someone, I don't know, like complimenting someone else to brighten their day. It's a really easy thing to do, but sometimes I feel like we have a hard time doing it.
Yeah. And I think to your point, what you're saying is like, all right, do you maybe have a heightened sense of your ego? All right, sure. Maybe you're going to go out there and life is going to humble you, because it will. Life is going to humble you. Which is good. We all need that at some point in life, right? So if you kind of approach it from the idea that every single time you get humbled, I don't know, think of it like a proverbial scar, right? The scar healed, but it's still present with you, but you learned from it, right? I mean, so that's going to be life. So are you egotistical to use your version of egotistical? Like, I don't know, maybe not, who knows? But the idea is that at the end of the day, I mean, life's going to teach you lessons, whether or not you want to see them or not. That's kind of that's the play, right? And so some people will experience something and not learn, and some people will experience something and totally learn. So that open-mindedness, kind of to get out of that egotism, is the idea of like, all right, well, I need to be aware of others. I need to be aware of myself. I need to be aware of myself first so I can give myself to others, whatever, right? Whatever bumper sticker or t-shirt or Hallmark card you want to throw out. But yeah, it's the idea of like, do you have an ego? Yeah, maybe so. But the fact that you know you have an ego is probably good.
Yeah.
Like that's a good thing. Yeah. That's probably a good thing.
There's people out there who have no clue.
Yeah, right. Like I have a heightened sense of my ego, and then okay, let's work on that. Work on that.
So something I've been thinking about recently a lot, and have almost wanted to bring up in class, even though it's completely unrelated to the current curriculum, is I've always thought it was kind of like a shame. It's hard to describe, but like just for us as humans, it's like pretty natural to like desensitize is a terrible word, but like to get used to things and like stop appreciating them. And it's like, let me try to think. Like, I'll even like have a night and think about like, Grant, you should probably start, to be more grateful and think about, you have this family and you have all these friends and you're in a great community, and you should really probably try to enjoy that more and be conscious of it. And like the next morning, like completely forget about it. You just right back into like, it's almost like I'm not living right now. Like I'm only living like when I go back and reflect and try to be like it's hard. Like right now, it's hard.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I mean, I guess, there's this idea in psychology, and I cover it in regular psych, and hopefully next year we get to cover it in dual credit. And Mr. Pelican and I, there's this idea called the hedonic treadmill, and kind of what you're referring to is kind of this thing called the hedonic treadmill. Really quick and short, hedonism, right? So like we're kind of consumed by this race. There's a race, right? You're in a race.
Yeah.
And so the idea is like we get on this proverbial hedonic treadmill, right? And we sprint and we run and we attain and we attain. But then, by all of this exhaustion and all of this, us having to perform and do, like you said, you might be reflective at 8 o'clock at night when you're calm, but then 7:25 comes around again and you got to get back on the treadmill, and all that calmness is gone because now you got to do your college essays. You got to take a test. You got to write this paper. You got to get this letter of rec, whatever. Like life comes. I think to the point, and this is hard, is the idea of we as humans need to take a step off the treadmill. We just got to find ways. I don't know what that is for you. Like, I don't know what that might be. It might be like you're going to go for a walk. You're going to read a book. You're going to binge out on a Netflix show. I don't know, whatever it might be. It's just like we need to find times to come off of the treadmill. But it's hard because we've been conditioned and trained to perform.
It's also hard because I don't know if it's just because of the way we've been conditioned or...
Yeah, it's probably more than just conditioning. That's just the quick dime store.
You're always kind of like told like, I want to like accomplish things in life. And that's kind of always associated with having to work really hard and always be doing something. But I feel I think it's also important to work hard because hard work leads to satisfaction later in life. But also I think society needs to try to it's okay sometimes to not be actively doing something and working towards something, because part of life is just just appreciating the world around you. And there's a balance to everything. And especially in a capitalistic society that's constantly just driven everyone go, 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 go. like it's okay to sometimes just stop and
Right.
not do anything.
Well, what are we called? We're called human beings. We're not called human doings.
Yeah.
Right? And so the idea is like when our brain, whatever, consciousness has to be sometimes. And sometimes our doing gets in the way of the being. Like it's tough. It's tough and it's hard because, we've, like you said, you live in a culture, in a society where it says like, well, you got to go do, you got to do. And then you're defined by your do.
Yes.
Well, ultimately, at the end of the day, what are you defined by? Well, you're not defined necessarily by your do. You're defined by your being.
Yeah.
And so if we can just even if you did the being 5 minutes a day, it's not like you have to go out and be.
Yeah.
I'm not saying like, hey, quit everything,
Yeah.
go wander into the woods and never come back. Like
Yeah.
that's not. I mean, that would actually be kind of fun, but like the idea is like that's not necessarily realistic, right? So we still have to kind of put the mask on over here and let's just play the game. But then also too, we still have to like have a handshake agreement with ourselves that, well, I need to get back to Curt.
Yeah.
I need to be a little bit. And if I can do that, well, then maybe I can be a more effective friend, father, husband, teacher.
Yeah.
But I got to at least give to myself some way. But what's interesting about that is that maybe society says, well, you have to give. You can't give to yourself. That's selfish.
Yeah.
And in some ways, you kind of have to give to yourself because then you potentially might be being selfish to someone else unintentionally, intentionally. You don't want to do it.
Yeah.
But it's like the idea of like, look, if I'm not taking care of myself, well, then I might not be taking care of you two or whatever, my children as well as I could.
And at the end of the day, it's your life. You try to be non-selfish and you try to be helpful to people, and you could find meaning like self-worth through helping others. But I always think like life doesn't last forever, and at some point you kind of have to figure yourself out and like do stuff like for you, and because it's your life, like
Right.
you gotta find some satisfaction and do the things you want to do in life,
Yeah.
So
And as long as you have that handshake agreement with yourself, and we've talked about this in class, it doesn't matter what you do, do what you like well, right? Just go do it well. And if at the end of the day, you are happy with what you are doing and you're doing it well and you like it, well, then that's great.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't matter. I'm not going to look at you in 20 years and be like, oh, you decided to do this. Ultimately, at the end of the day, it's going to be you, Grant, sitting there in 20, 30, 40 years saying, okay, well, I made this handshake agreement to live this existence in this life. And I liked it and I loved it and I was good at it and I was accomplished by it. And ultimately, that's the end of the day. That would be, I guess, related back to the idea of your being.
Yeah.
Right. But then if you're 40 years down the road and now you're 60, whatever, 57, and you're like, man, all I've done is do. Right. I don't know. I don't know what that's going to mean when you're 70.
Yeah. Probably good.
Yeah. I don't know. That's up to you. There might be some people who watch this and be like, no, I want to do. Okay.
Life's too short to have that like tough guy mentality that you're gonna just suffer because like that's the right thing to do. Like,
yeah.
I like no, like you can enjoy life. That's okay. You can still be a man and enjoy life.
Right.
Like that's fine.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
And that key word is like, all right, I guess enjoyment's going to be relative to the person.
Exactly. Yeah.
And if you want to come to me and say, hey, I work 90 hours a week and I make $5 million a year, and you're like, hey, you enjoy it, you love it, are you being? And you're like, yeah, then great. Then that's it. And if you want to reverse it the other way and you work 90 hours a week and you make 50 grand a year and you're happy and you love it, then fine. Whatever. Throughout the numbers are arbitrary, but it's like, great. That'd be awesome.
That's the bell, folks. Unfortunately,
I don't know. I guess that was some great advice. I was going to ask, do you have any overall life advice? But I feel like that could be it.
Well, I don't know. And again, like you don't take everything I say as like something you should adopt and do.
Yeah.
Right. Think for yourself. That would be my advice.
Yeah.
Think for yourself if you like what I said, so if there's something I said and you're like, hey, okay, I kind of like that, fine. And if you want to look at me and be like, hey, you're an idiot, and that's fine too. Like, so I mean, again, think for yourself, and make sure. And I guess I don't want to speak in an absolute, but the idea is like, make sure that when you're thinking for yourself, in some way or form, you are right to yourself.
Yes.
And that you are kind of right. Like, I know that's hard. I don't know if that made sense the way I said it.
I know what you're trying to say.
But the idea is like, well, just pursue your own truth without, I guess, hurting or harming others and yourself.
Yeah.
Just know yourself.
You gotta like assess where you are and what you want and be honest about it. Like, you gotta reflect more because you want to stay like centered and on the right track.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to like reflect 20 years down the future and be like, oh, I probably should have done that. You want to reflect now and be like, I want to do that. Okay, I need to actively make sure I'm doing that right now.
Yeah, and you might get to a point in your life where you're like, wow, maybe I should have done that.
Yeah.
But that's okay.
Yeah, everyone has that.
Yeah, like it's going to happen.
Yeah.
But that's okay. That's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And just know that that's going to happen. But then again, learn from it, adapt, change. Don't get stuck in it.
Yeah.
Right?
I think, the big thing is, like, if you know you're kind of going down like a road where potentially you might not enjoy the outcome of it,
mm-hmm.
don't just kind of like let life take you. Like, assess it, be honest with yourself, and be like, I'm not going to do this. Because sometimes, like, life has a way of just kind of dragging you through it. Like, you almost feel like you're not really, like, you're not in control of like where you're going.
Yeah, you want to be an active participant to some extent.
Yeah, you want to be controlling where your life is going.
But I can't, as a human being, I can't just be my own separate entity. Sometimes I want to.
Yeah.
But then that would be selfish, maybe to my wife or my children, to you. Like, so it's like I still got to kind of like.
There's always a balance.
Got it. Yeah, there's a total middle ground, and make sure that the balance, in some way, I'll say it this way, the 51st%. The 1% leans a little bit more towards you.
I like that. That.
Maybe just a smidge. And the other 49%, fine. You just kind of have to do what you need to do. But that's maybe the way to go.
I think that's a great way to end the episode.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you so much for being on the podcast. It was a
blast. Thank you.
It was everything I hoped for and more.
Okay. Okay.
So
I am humbled by that.
This has been Etc. signing off.
Okay.
Thank you.